Welcome to today's episode of Destroying Disney, where today we'll be discussing the inaccuracy in Disney's first movie, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
We will talk about the story origin, daily life, clothing, art, music, economics, politics, tone of the movie, and lastly, why Disney toned down what really happened.
My name is Alexis.
My name is Olivia.
And my name is Christopher.
So first, we're going to start off with the origin of the story.
So, Snow White was believed to be originated from a real-life story. And it was one of the many theories that it was based off of Marguerite von Waldeck. She was a countess in Germany, born to Philip IV in 1533. At the age 16, she was forced out of her home by her mother, Katharina of Hatzfeld. She moved to a place called Wildingen in the Brussels. And it was there she fell in love with a prince who later became King Philip II of Spain. Marguerite's parents did not approve of the marriage because it was politically inconvenient. She then died at the age of 21 from mysterious poisoning. And later, and another relation to the story, the Seven Dwarfs were believed to re-originated from Marguerite's father's mines. He employed children, and they were often referred to as poor dwarves.
Snow White was based in 16th century Germany. Snow White had a few similarities to the Middle Ages, like the family betrayal and the families fighting for the throne, and in certain situations, getting rid of their family. Usually, the heir to the throne would be a firstborn, and since there was no known siblings of Snow White, she might have been the heir to the throne. The castle in Snow White had arches and fine details that the castles at the time had.
So now we are going to talk about the daily life of a noblewoman. Her day would consist of discussing the tournaments, betrothals, marriages, and poetry. The noblewomen were expected to look over the education of the girls sent to their house. In the morning, she was given her dress of the day by her ladies. In the afternoon, the noblewoman did what a housewife would do, such as supervising the meals. During the free time, they would dance or do other things like embroidery. They would have supper, and then after supper was some sort of entertainment. Many times throughout the day, the noblewoman would pray. I didn't see the queen doing any of these things I just mentioned in Snow White. Her daily life would change if the husband were absent because she would take her husband's place. In Snow White, the queen did end up taking the place of her husband, so this was accurate. One of the things that I did not see in the movie were knights, and at the time they were still relevant. Only the wealthy could afford them, so I would think that the queen would have some knights, but that was not the case. Women would wear dark-colored, heavy dresses with exaggerated puffs and defined at the hips around the mid to late 1500s, which is when Snow White must have taken place. And Snow White wore a really bright colored dress. Art in the Middle Ages had more to do with religious art. Some of the art were paintings, sculptures, metalwork, engraving, stained glass windows, and manuscripts. We didn't see much artwork in Snow White. There was a wide variety of music. Some of the instruments that were used were pipes, drums, fiddles, harps, bagpipes, and a hurdy-gurdy. In Snow White, the dwarfs sung a song that had some yodeling, and yodeling wasn't brought up until around 1545, and that does mean that Snow White took place around the mid to late 1500s.
Next is economics.
During the 1400s and 1500s, Germany was still mainly sustained by agriculture. A surplus of grain was exported through Baltic ports. The extra grain was also sold to nearby towns, and the profits were used to buy up more land. The Black Plague took away many laborers. Then the surviving workers raised the cost of their services. The shortage of labor and rising costs put financial strain on the lords of the land. These lords then took out this financial strain on the tenant farmers, imposing immense taxation and denying access to their resources such as woods, streams, and commons.
For politics and royalty,
in 1520, Charles V was crowned King of Germany, assuming the title of Roman Emperor-elect and succeeding Maximilian. The following year, the imperial diet met at Worms, where Martin Luther defended his thesis. This represented Charles's first battle against Protestantism. Martin Luther's 95 Thesis spread like wildfire with the assistance of the printing press. This fought against constantly by the government.
The culture during the time in which Snow White took place was austere or strict and religious. In the movie Snow White, the queen seemed more concerned about her beauty and Snow White overtaking her beauty. The movie is basically showing that beauty is the most important thing in life.
in the emotion and tone, Disney glorifies the Middle Ages. Disney is known for its tendency to cover up serious aspects of the real world. Now, this was within the same time period as the Black Plague. This carried a tone of despair and depression into what is known as the Dark Ages. This is quite the opposite of the tone of the movie in many parts, which showed happiness and carefree attitude. As we learned, there's a lot of chaos, genocide in the Middle Ages. When Snow White ran into the woods, she was in serious danger and had nothing to protect herself with. Snow White could have been caught by a hunter or something, or someone much worse, especially since women were rarely outside in the woods. Snow White ran into a small home and started to start cleaning. She was talking to animals, and this is just strange behavior. Now, to why Disney glorified the Middle Ages?
Disney dialed down the real world for the Snow White movie for one reason: the children. The target audience for almost every Disney movie is the children of the world. The Dark Ages were a terrible time. Children simply cannot and should not be exposed to these truths at that age. That is why Snow White was inaccurate in some parts. And that's all we have for you today, folks. This has been Destroying Disney.